Nowadays, the word groundbreaking has been used to describe a lot of things, hasn't it? Maybe an animated film that pushes what's capable with its medium, or a series that shows us themes and elements that has never been seen before, or maybe a piece of technology that the makers claim is groundbreaking, but in reality it's just some overpriced piece of junk. But in the world of gaming, there are lots of games that claim to be genre-defying or groundbreaking, but all they really have to show is decent graphics with gameplay that sounds interesting on paper, but when you actually play the game, it just ends up being a broken mess. I'm looking at you, Starfield. You couldn't even get an Irish actor to play an Irish character, like, come on.
Bollocks! Is that how I come off now? Well, maybe if you took the time to properly dress yourself for the outside, you wouldn't be losing your fingers, you Egypt.
Bonjour, as they say in the States.
But I think a game series that deserves to be called groundbreaking has to be the Red Dead Redemption series. I'm sure we've all heard of this series before, right? Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 are often considered to be some of the greatest video games of our time, and rightfully so.
Now these games mean a lot to me, and I couldn't tell you how many hours I put into them. I even own the physical versions of these games because I just love these games so much. I know physical gaming is kinda dying, but I don't care, I love these games. I even own all the GTA games physically. Look how much of a fucking virgin I am, fuck.
But back on track, these two games have become legendary. Even the Undead Nightmare DLC is still remembered very fondly by fans. Like seriously, that game mode is incredible. Now obviously, I can't forget about the original Red Dead Revolver game, which basically started the entire series, but it's not really connected with the Red Dead Redemption universe, kinda similar to how the 3D GTA games aren't connected to the HD GTA games. Now, considering how amazing Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 are, it does kinda beg the question, what about a Red Dead 3? This has been in my mind for a while, but I never really gave it much thought, until some supposed leaks claimed that Red Dead Redemption 3 was in development. Now obviously, these leaks are completely fake, but it did properly get me thinking about what Red Dead Redemption 3 could even be like, and more importantly, do we need a third game? Now in order for me to even answer this question, I would like to go through all the possibilities of a third game, mainly going over what we could see and how Rockstar could pull it off. Also, big spoilers for the entire Red Dead series, so if you haven't played the games yet, then what are you waiting for? Play them already, they're fucking amazing.
He's willing to take us to Australia or Tahiti.
Firstly, one of the topics I see discussed a lot of the time is who the main protagonist would be. And a lot of people talk about Jack Marston being the main protagonist, who's the son of John Marston. Now it goes without saying that this isn't really a good idea. While it would definitely be interesting to see more stories of Jack Marston after the events of Red Dead 1, it wouldn't really make any sense when you think about it. Like, Red Dead 1 is all about the Wild West coming to an end during the early 1910s. The game ends with John Marston, one of the last remaining outlaws, getting killed. Then the game properly ends in 1914, when Jack Marston kills Edgar Ross, the man who killed John. This is meant to be the point where the Wild West is officially over, and Jack Marston is kind of the last outlaw. There is some extra story details where he becomes a very successful book writer and lives until 1992, which means he would have been around during the events of Vice City and San Andreas. Ain't that neat? But a game focused on Jack Marston would be kind of pointless, honestly. Like, what could they even do after the events of Red Dead 1? The Wild West is done, over with. I heard a few people saying it would be cool to see him fight during World War I. Why? How would that even be related to Red Dead Redemption? That just makes no sense. Maybe they could show what Jack Marston was up to between 1911 and 1914, but what could they really do? Like, Jack's whole goal was to kill Edgar Ross, and he does. So I just don't see a game with Jack as the main protagonist working, honestly. Now with all that out of the way, I see 3 possible candidates for the main protagonist in Red Dead 3. The first would honestly have to be Dutch van der Linde. This choice is kind of a personal favor of mine, and I would like to explain why. Did that rhyme right there? Fucking hell, I need to get better at script writing. Throughout Red Dead 2 and parts of 1, we always see the bad side of him. We do see small bits of his good side in Red Dead 2, but I think it would be very cool to see the character that Arthur is always talking about, the Dutch that had morals and wasn't completely insane. Plus, we'll be able to see what the Van der Linde gang was like during its heyday, and how great of a leader Dutch used to be. Dutch is already such a fantastic character, and I would love to see Rockstar dive deeper into his past and what he used to be like. Then the second choice for me would have to be Sadie. Sadie was a character that I really grew to love in Red Dead 2. When we were first introduced to her in the opening, I assumed she was going to be an annoying character who constantly needs saving, but But as the game continued, her character really started to grow on me. I loved the relationship she had with Arthur and later John. It was very sweet how she was one of the last members of the gang that stuck by John and even helped him kill off Micah. Plus her story of starting off as a widow who loses everything, then becomes this badass bounty hunter and bodyguard is really cool to see. So a Red Dead 3 where we get to actually play as her would be very interesting. I wouldn't want it to be before she becomes a widow or after she kills Micah, but maybe just before the events of Red Dead 2's epilogue, see what she's been up to and all the wacky hijinks she got into. Now this does show its own issues since I couldn't imagine a deep or compelling story with her as the main protagonist, but you never know really. We could get something akin to Liberty City stories or Vice City stories, where we get to play as a minor character and see what their lives used to be like before the events of their respective games. And finally, my third choice would be an entirely original protagonist. Now I know this sounds kinda boring, and honestly I wasn't really all for it since trying to create a character that could be on the same level as Arthur or John would be near impossible. John himself is a fantastic character, but Arthur Morgan is on a whole other level. He is easily one of the greatest characters in all of gaming. I could go on for ages about how amazing he is, but we would be here all day. And you gotta keep in mind that people weren't really the biggest fan of Arthur when he was first announced. Players had grown so attached to John in the first game and wanted to play as him in the next game. So Rockstar introducing this Arthur character who had never been mentioned once in the first game kind of annoyed people. But big surprise, Arthur turned out to be a phenomenal character and everyone fell in love with him. So an entirely new protagonist could maybe work, but the expectations would be insanely high for them. Like trying to be on the same level as Arthur Morgan or John Marston will not be easy. Plus they would need to find a way to connect the character into the Red Dead universe and give them a solid backstory. Like they can't just throw a new character onto us with zero explanations and expect us to connect with them. But I do trust Rockstar. They may be a shady company with terrible business practices, but they know how to write characters. But now that we have the characters out of the way, another burning question that everyone has is, where would a Red Dead 3 even take place? Red Dead Redemption 1 mainly took place in New Austin and Mexico, while Red Dead 2 took place in Ambarnio, New Hanover, Lemanoy, West Elizabeth, an updated map of New Austin, and briefly we're on the island of Guarma. Now all of these locations are very memorable and look visually stunning. I will still never forget playing the first Red Dead game and riding into Mexico while that song Far Away played in the background.
Step in front of a runaway train, just to feel alive again.
Oh, that was so amazing. But honestly, I wouldn't really want to see these locations again, since we've already gone to experience them. Hell, we got to experience New Austin twice in both games.
Also, I'm sorry, but that always annoyed me because Red Dead 2's epilogue takes place in 1907, alright? But John doesn't go to New Austin until 1911. That's when Red Dead 1 takes place. So why is he in New Austin in 1907? I don't know. This just always annoyed me. It was so fucking dumb.
So the next logical step would be an entirely new map, honestly. It would be very difficult to fit an entirely new map into the story. Like if we do play as Dutch, it would be very hard to fit him into a new location that isn't part of the Red Dead 2 map. But in the extended lore, he did meet up with Jose in 1878 while traveling through Chicago. Now Chicago could be an interesting location, or maybe even more locations around America. Both Dutch and Hosea were set up in Ohio for a while, so that could be something. But a location that I would personally love to see in Red Dead 3 would have to be Mexico. One of my least favorite aspects about Red Dead 2 is how they completely cut Mexico from the map. We do know it was supposed to be in the game since we can still access parts of the map. Maybe they didn't know how to fit Mexico into the story, which is kind of understandable. But Red Dead 3 would be a perfect time to bring Mexico back but make the map much bigger. Hell, if the protagonist is completely original, then maybe they can be of Mexican descent. Or at least have the majority of the game in Mexico. Of course, I would like to see some parts of the old Red Dead 2 map, but some new locations would be very appreciated. But now comes the most tricky part of this video, the story. Now I obviously can't predict the story of a game that doesn't even exist yet, but we can throw around some ideas. Firstly, would the game be a prequel or a sequel? Well, it's a bit complicated to tell since doing a direct sequel to Red Dead 1 would be pretty bad. Remember guys, no Jack Marston solo game, bad idea. But a direct sequel to Red Dead 2 could maybe work, although it wouldn't really be a sequel or a prequel, but more of a midquel since it'll be taking place before the events of Red Dead 1, but after the events of Red Dead 2. God, this timeline is confusing. The only protagonist who could work in the midquel would be Sadie, since it would make the most sense seeing what her character was up to before the events of Red Dead 2's epilogue. Seeing Dutch as a protagonist in the midquel would not really work, since we already know that him and Micah were up to their usual criminal shenanigans. Also, I fucking hate Micah so much and I never want to see him in a fucking game again.
Fuck you.
But if we were to play as Dutch, a prequel game would make the most sense here, honestly. Like I mentioned earlier, a game where we see the Vanderland gang at their height would be amazing to see. But maybe we can go back even further, where we see Dutch, Hosea, and Arthur just starting off and recruiting other members. That could be something cool. Now with another protagonist that's completely original, I don't really know, just throw them anywhere before 1914, okay? But something that I thought about while writing the script is, how could they incorporate the theme of redemption into the story? Like, think about it, the two Red Dead games have a theme of redemption. In the first game, John is trying to redeem his past by killing all his former gang members and protecting his family. His big redemption comes at the end where he sacrifices himself to save his family. Then his son Jack avenges his father by killing Edgar Ross, which leaves everything on a somewhat bittersweet yet satisfying ending. And in Red Dead 2, Arthur is constantly trying to redeem all the terrible things that him and the people around him have done, but he keeps falling back into the life of crime. Not until the end when all hell breaks loose and he sacrifices himself just to save John's life. And just like Jack in Red Dead 1, John eventually hunts down the man who killed Arthur and avenges his death, giving us once again a bittersweet yet satisfying ending. But how are they going to repeat this theme in the third game? Honestly, I have no idea how they could possibly do this. Maybe this is where we can benefit from a new protagonist, but again, Rockstar would have to work very hard to create a new protagonist that we can connect with. And I don't really see how they could do a redemption story with Dutch Vanderland, to be honest. Maybe it could work with Sadie, but I'm not too sure, honestly. Anyway, back to what this video is initially about. Do we need a Red Dead Redemption 3? But more importantly, could it be good? Well, in my personal opinion, I believe it could maybe work, but Rockstar would have to be really clever with how they go about the story and characters. These games mean so much to people, so it's important that Rockstar doesn't just shit out another game and potentially ruin the legacy of these amazing games. Plus, it's kind of worrying how Dan Houser, who wrote both Red Dead 1 and 2, is no longer involved with the company anymore, so I'm worried that his absence could greatly hinder the quality of the game. But as long as Rockstar doesn't treat this game like they did with a certain definitive edition, then we should be fine. Anyway, before I end off this video, I decided to reach out to some other creators who are also fans of Red Dead Redemption, and asked if they would like to discuss their hopes and expectations for a Red Dead 3. So, take it away.
Red Dead Redemption 2 is my favorite game of all time. I've played through the story mode 4 times and I've seen every single Red Harlow as Uncle theory that exists. So it goes without saying that if Rockstar ever released an RDR 3, my expectations would be through the roof. Still, as much as I did like RDR 2, the game still had a lot of flaws. First thing I think they should improve upon in the next entry would be how the open world interacts with the story. The honor mechanic is obviously a good way to go about it, but aside from that, I feel like certain secondary missions should have more impact on the world that the game is set in. Kind of like how The Witcher 3 handled side quests. The freedom of handling missions should also be brought back, with the game allowing you to use more creative ways to tackle story missions, kind of like how it was in the PS2 era of GTA games. And lastly, there's the main story. I've seen a lot of people say that it should take place a couple of years after RDR 1 with you playing as Jack Marston in a post-World War I world, but honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of this idea. If the game is still going to be a Red Dead Redemption game, there needs to be some sort of redemption. The most appropriate move in my opinion would be if they made us play as a founding Vanderland gang member, a brand new character that we've never heard of before. Kind of like how Arthur was. Being able to see the gang in its prime with no signs of Micah or tuberculosis would be amazing. And if this new main character were to die, I feel like it would only be fair if they gave us the ability to play as Arthur again. Maybe around the same time that Jack Marston is born or a bit earlier.
Hey, PickleBloom here. I believe that making a Red Dead 3 would be quite hard. Why, you may ask? Well, I believe the story might have already been concluded anyways. The original story of Arthur, which ties directly into the story of John, has already been told and fleshed out. Both games are about redemption, which is, you know, in the name, which basically means the redemption has already been redempted. One could argue that Jack could be a competitor, but I feel like the game would be lackluster and would have a hard time implementing new characters and a new story. There are already a lot of established established characters, and we already know what happens to Jack and how he sort of got his revenge. You see, Red Dead 2 worked so well because in Red Dead 1, the gang and what happened with it was still surrounded in mystery. Rockstar Games was able to use that mystery surrounding the gang and make a whole new game with it. The only way Red Dead 3 would work would probably be a whole new setting and a new story with new characters, which would be unlikely, but possible. I don't think a Red Dead 3 will ever come out, but that isn't actually a problem with me, because again, the story of Arthur and John have already been concluded, and we know what happens before the games and after. Although, if a Red Dead 3 were ever to come out, I'd be happy to play it, of course, but I'd be very interested in the direction they would take that game, because of course, milking sequels is a very risky choice. However, if I had to choose the story of another Red Dead game, I'd go with the quote, new setting idea. Still in America, but another part of America. Maybe you can play as an O'Driscoll member, but I feel like another gang or maybe a law enforcer or any other role would work, because I think a new refreshing setting and new characters could work. But I guess you can argue that it would not fit as a quote, Red Dead title game. What do you think?
Wow, thanks guys for your incredible opinions. Honestly though, go subscribe to them. They are both really great creators and make amazing videos. And while you're at it, subscribe to me please. I put a lot of work into this video, so, you know, follow the socials as well, like, you know.